The alarm didn't just sound. It screamed like something dying, which Ryan supposed was appropriate given that everything electronic on Kepler 442b's surface was about to get fried. He was elbow-deep in a sample case of bioluminescent moss when the lab's AI started its catastrophic litany. Solar storm escalation, radiation levels climbing past orange into that special shade of red that meant your insurance doesn't cover this. Fantastic, Ryan muttered, sealing the samples and making for the radiation shutters. 3 months without a proper storm, and it picks today. The habitat's windows polarized to black as magnetic fields outside began their violent dance. Ryan had just finished securing the backup generators when movement on the perimeter display caught his attention. A ship, small and fast, trailing plasma like a comet with regrets. Its trajectory was all wrong, the kind of wrong that ended with impact craters and insurance claims. He watched it come down 2 kilometers north, carving through the crystal forests he'd been cataloging for 6 months. The crash sent up a plume of dirt and ionized particles that his sensors couldn't quite parse through the electromagnetic chaos. Well, that's someone's bad day, Ryan said to the empty lab. Then his ethical subroutines kicked in, the annoying ones his mother had installed in his personality back when he was young and impressionable, and he was suiting up before his rational mind could properly object. The storm outside was trying to murder anything with circuits. Ryan's suit complained constantly as he trudged through howling wind that tasted like copper and ozone, following the beacon signal that flickered in and out of existence. He found the scout ship embedded nose first in crystalline soil, its hull scorched black and still steaming. The pilot was slumped in the cockpit, and Ryan's first coherent thought was that her ears were unreasonably long. His second thought was that she was dying, which seemed more immediately relevant. "Hey!" he shouted over the storm, prying open the damaged hatch. "I'm human, I'm friendly, and I have a habitat with functional shielding. Nod if you'd like to not die today." She stirred, those elongated ears twitching, and her eyes opened, large and luminous, and regarding him with what might have been suspicion or might have been concussion. Her skin was doing something strange, flickering with patterns of light that his xenology courses had mentioned but never adequately described. "Storm," she managed in accented standard. "Can't, fleet won't." "Yeah, nobody's flying in this mess," Ryan agreed, getting an arm under her shoulders. "Let's go before we both become interesting radiation statistics." She was lighter than expected, her frame built for different gravity, and she smelled like something between cinnamon and electrical storms. Ryan made it back to the habitat with his suit's sensors, screaming warnings about exposure levels, practically falling through the airlock with his unexpected guest. Decontamination took 20 minutes of chemical showers and scanner sweeps. The alien woman, Zephira, his database helpfully identified, tolerated it with groggy patience, leaning against the chamber wall. Her uniform was torn, revealing skin that shifted colors subtly in the harsh light. "Your atmospheric mix," she asked hoarsely, "should be compatible," Ryan said, checking her species' requirements. "Your people breathe oxygen-nitrogen. We've got that. Might be a little heavy on the CO2, but nothing dangerous." Convenient, isn't it? Almost like someone planned for our species to coexist. He grinned. "I'm Ryan, by the way. Dr. Ryan Chun, xenobotanist and apparently amateur rescue services." "Zephira," she said. "Scout 3rd class, currently crashed and very far from my fleet." The medical scanner cleared her for the habitat's main atmosphere. She stumbled when the chamber opened, and Ryan caught her elbow. Her skin was warm, warmer than human normal, and the bioluminescent patterns pulsed faster at his touch. "Sorry," they both said simultaneously. "Your sleep platform?" Zephira asked, swaying slightly. "Over there. Take it. I'll monitor the storm." She made it 3 steps before her legs gave out. Ryan got her to the platform, really just a glorified cot with decent padding, and she collapsed onto it with a sigh that sounded the same in any language. "Your fleet will come?" Ryan asked, pulling up storm tracking data. "When the storm clears." "Days, maybe." Her eyes were already closing. "Your kindness is noted, human." "Ryan, and you're welcome. Try not to die on my bed. The paperwork's murder." She might have smiled. Ryan couldn't quite tell with Zephyr's facial features. He settled into his monitoring station, watching radiation levels paint abstract art across his displays. Outside, the storm raged with the kind of violence that made planetary settlement feel like optimistic hubris. Hours passed. The habitat's lights dimmed to night cycle. Ryan ran diagnostics, checked air scrubbers, made sure the shielding held. Standard procedure during storms. But his attention kept drifting to the sleeping figure on his bed. She'd curled onto her side, those long ears relaxed against her skull, her breathing slow and steady. Her skin still flickered with faint patterns, probably automatic responses his xenology texts had mentioned. Temperature regulation, maybe, or metabolic cycles. Ryan's own exhaustion was creeping in, the adrenaline of the rescue fading. His monitoring station chair was uncomfortable at the best of times, and these weren't the best of times. He glanced at the sleep platform, easily wide enough for two, if both parties maintained reasonable personal space. This is probably against some protocol, he muttered, but his body was already making decisions his brain couldn't properly veto. He lay down on the far edge, keeping a respectful meter of distance, his back to Zephira. The storm sang its electromagnetic song through the habitat's walls. The radiation shielding hummed its response. Ryan's last conscious thought was that tomorrow would involve so much paperwork, and then sleep took him under. Neither of them noticed when the distance between them narrowed, when proximity became closeness, when two bodies, sharing warmth in the dark, activated something ancient and patient written in genetic code neither species remembered carrying. Zephyr's biomonitor woke her with a soft chime that meant something was wrong. Not danger wrong, but anomaly wrong, which in her experience often preceded danger by an uncomfortably short interval. She opened her eyes to unfamiliar ceiling panels and remembered. Crash, storm, human rescuer, exhaustion. Standard disaster protocol, nothing unusual except the part where she'd apparently slept better than she had in months despite being stranded on an alien world during a solar catastrophe. The chime persisted. She raised her forearm, activating the holographic display woven into her skin, expecting maybe radiation exposure or cellular damage. The scan results materialized in soft blue light, and Zephira stared at them with the particular stillness that comes right before total panic. Hormone cascade active. Reproductive matrix engaged. Cellular division rate elevated. Gestation indicators positive. No, she whispered. No, absolutely not. She ran the diagnostic again. Same results. A third time, her fingers shaking as she input the commands. The biomonitor was very certain, very calm, very wrong about what it claimed was happening inside her body. Behind her, the human stirred. Ryan, she remembered. Dr. Ryan Chun, who'd been kind enough to risk radiation exposure to pull her from the wreckage and was about to have a very awkward morning. Zephira sat up carefully, her head swimming. Everything felt different. Her body temperature was elevated. Her metabolic rate spiked, and there was a deep thrumming warmth in her core that shouldn't exist without months of preparation. The harmony required neural bonding, genetic compatibility testing, synchronized hormonal cycles managed by trained facilitators. She'd undergone exactly none of it. This is a malfunction, she told the biomonitor firmly. You were damaged in the crash. The device displayed her species' equivalent of a shrug, unchanged readings, confident in its accuracy. Ryan was sitting up now, rubbing his eyes. Morning. How's the... He stopped, apparently registering her expression. What's wrong? Zephyr's translator implant struggled with the Zephyrin curses she wanted to use. Your species and mine cannot reproduce together. This is established science, confirmed by multiple studies. Chromosomally impossible. Ah, yes. Good morning to you, too. She thrust her arm toward him, the holographic display still active. Then explain this. Ryan blinked at the data, his expression shifting from confusion to scientific interest to something approaching alarm. Are those gestation markers? According to my malfunctioning biomonitor, yes. But that's impossible. I know. I just said that. Zephira stood, then immediately sat back down as dizziness washed over her. Your planet's gravity is annoying. It's pretty standard gravity, actually. Ryan was on his feet now, moving to his lab station. Can I run some scans? Compare your current readings to baseline. I don't have baseline readings from before. She stopped. Wait, the decontamination scanner. It would have recorded my biosignature when we entered. Exactly. Ryan was already pulling up files, his fingers dancing across holographic interfaces. 2 displays materialized side by side, her readings from 12 hours ago and her readings now. The differences were impossible to miss. That's a lot of new proteins, Ryan said quietly. That's a biological impossibility. Well, yes, but it's an impossible impossibility that appears to be happening anyway. He looked at her, and there was something in his expression that wasn't quite fear, but wasn't quite wonder either. Do you feel different? Zephira wanted to snap at him, but honesty won out. Starving. Exhausted despite sleeping. Warm. My skin patterns are more active than they should be. She pulled up her uniform sleeve, revealing the bioluminescent markings, pulsing in complex rhythms. These are old patterns. Ancestral bloodline markers. We don't express these anymore. Ryan leaned closer, professionally fascinated. Meaning your people used to? According to historical databases, yes. Before we developed the harmony protocols. When Zephirans were scattered across colony worlds, without proper facilitators. She stared at the patterns on her own skin, like they belonged to someone else. The Wanderer clans. They had to reproduce quickly, without the traditional preparations. But that was thousands of years ago, and the capability should be dormant. Should be, Ryan repeated. But what if it's not? What if it's just waiting for the right trigger? The right trigger being what, exactly? Proximity to a human male, during a solar storm? I mean, when you put it that way it sounds ridiculous. It is ridiculous. Zephira's ears flattened against her skull. Your species and mine have different chromosomal structures, different gestation periods, incompatible biochemistry. We've been allies for 60 years, and not once has anyone gotten accidentally pregnant from. She stopped, horrified. From sleeping next to each other? Ryan finished carefully. They stared at each other for a long moment. The habitat's air recyclers hummed in the silence. I kept my uniform on, Zephira said finally. I was on the other side of the bed. We didn't even touch. Not that I remember. Another silence, this one heavier. So either, Ryan said slowly, your biomonitor is catastrophically wrong, which seems unlikely given the protein changes I'm seeing in my scans, or our peoples are significantly more compatible than 60 years of xenobiology research has concluded. Zephira pulled up her fleet's medical database, searching for anything relevant. There was a study 15 years ago. Human-Zephyran genetic compatibility. Concluded it was theoretically possible, but practically impossible due to... She scrolled through technical jargon. Due to the requirement for artificial genomic bridging and embryonic environmental controls that don't exist in either species naturally. Theoretically possible, Ryan repeated. That's not the same as impossible. It's close enough. Zephira stood again, more carefully this time, and began pacing. Do you understand what this means? The harmony is sacred. It's not just reproduction, it's cultural identity. It's how we prove we're civilized, controlled, worthy of the colonies we've built. And I've just... She gestured helplessly at her abdomen. Bypassed all of it because I fell asleep next to a human. For what it's worth, I feel appropriately terrified. That's not comforting. It wasn't meant to be comforting. It was meant to be honest. Ryan ran a hand through his hair. Look, we need more data. I need to run full genomic scans, hormone panels, cellular analysis. Maybe there's another explanation. Like what? I don't know. Sympathetic biological resonance? Proximity-triggered dormant genes? Incredibly irresponsible evolutionary programming. Despite everything, Zephira felt her mouth twitch. That last one. Right. Ryan pulled up more scanning interfaces. Evolution doesn't always optimize for dignity. Clearly. She moved to his lab station, studying the data with him. The evidence was mounting, and none of it pointed toward a comforting conclusion. How long before your fleet realizes you're here? My fleet. Ryan blinked. Oh, I'm independent research. Just me and my moss samples. But your fleet will be looking for you. Yes. Zephira's hand drifted unconsciously to her abdomen. They will. And the moment I'm in scanner range, they'll know. The next 72 hours became what Ryan privately termed the most scientifically fascinating disaster of my career. Zephira called it the beginning of my inevitable exile, which Ryan felt was a bit pessimistic, but not entirely inaccurate. They converted his modest xenobotanical lab into something approximating a medical research station, which mostly meant shoving his carefully organized moss samples to one side and hoping the scanning equipment could multitask. The storm was dying outside, its electromagnetic fury fading to mere planetary catastrophe levels instead of civilization-ending ones. Draw blood here, Zephira instructed, extending her arm. The needle went in smoothly, and Ryan watched her blood fill the vial with an opalescent shimmer that his training had definitely not prepared him for. It's supposed to do that, he asked. It's not supposed to do a lot of things lately. Zephira's ears twitched in what he was learning meant irritation. Add it to the list. The blood analysis took 20 minutes and produced results that made Ryan check his equipment calibration 3 times. New proteins were appearing in her bloodstream in real time. Complex molecular structures that seemed to perfectly bridge human and Zephyran cellular machinery. This is remarkable, Ryan breathed, watching the data populate his display. Remarkable is not the word I'd use for carrying an impossible child that could get me declared contaminated and exiled. Right, yes, sorry. Terrifying biological mystery. Much better. He isolated one of the new protein structures, rotating it in holographic space. But look at this. It's like a universal adapter. It can interface with both our cellular systems. Zephira leaned over his shoulder, studying the data with professional interest despite her obvious anxiety. That shouldn't exist. Where's my body getting the template for this? That's the question. Ryan pulled up her genetic sequence from the decontamination scans. May I compare this to your current DNA? I want to see if anything's changed. My DNA doesn't just change. Neither does mine, but let's check anyway. The comparison revealed segments of her genome that were now expressing differently, regions that had been dormant before showing sudden activity. Ryan traced the active sequences, his excitement building despite the severity of their situation. Zephira, these are ancient. Look at the methylation patterns. These genes haven't been expressed in your bloodline for thousands of years. The Wanderer protocols, she said quietly. You think they're activating. I think something is activating them. The question is why now? Ryan started pulling up research on environmental triggers, stress responses, evolutionary biology. Your people scattered across colony worlds without harmony facilitators. They needed to reproduce quickly, adapt rapidly to new circumstances. So they evolved a backup system. Or they always had one, coded into the species before you even left your homeworld. A failsafe for exactly this kind of situation, isolation, need for genetic diversity, compatible species available. Zephira sat down heavily on his lab stool. You're saying my body recognized you as compatible and just decided to proceed without consulting me? Biology is notoriously bad at asking permission. Ryan immediately regretted the flippancy when he saw her expression. Sorry, but yes, that's essentially what the data suggests. The storm, the crash, the proximity. Maybe it all triggered something dormant. How wonderfully romantic, Zephira said dryly. My body's ancient survival instincts overrode thousands of years of cultural evolution because of a weather event. When you put it that way, it does sound a bit anticlimactic. She laughed despite herself, a crystalline sound that made Ryan's equipment briefly register as if wind chimes were playing in the lab. The fleet is going to arrive any day now. They'll scan me, see the changes, and I'll be placed in medical quarantine faster than you can say biological contamination. Would they really? Yes. Zephira's bioluminescent patterns darken, color draining from her skin. The harmony isn't just tradition. It's law. It's identity. Having a child outside the protocols there isn't even proper terminology for it, because it's not supposed to be possible. Ryan was quiet for a moment, thinking. His scientific training warred with his growing protectiveness toward both Zephira and the impossible thing growing inside her. What if we documented everything? Made it a matter of scientific record before they arrive? You think data will change their minds? I think data is the only thing that might. He pulled up a new interface, starting to compile their findings. Look, both our peoples have spent decades convinced that human Zephyran reproduction is impossible. If we can prove it's not only possible, but potentially natural, that it's written into your genetics, that changes everything. Or it changes nothing, and I become a cautionary tale. Optimism, Zephira. Try it sometime. I'm a scout. We're trained in realistic risk assessment, not optimism. Ryan grinned. Lucky for you, I'm a xenobotanist. We're trained to find life in impossible places and get excited about it. Over the next day, they worked systematically through every test Ryan's equipment could manage. They documented hormone levels, cellular division rates, genetic expression changes. Zephyr's metabolism was burning through his food supplies at an alarming rate. She ate 3 meals in the time it took him to finish one. This is embarrassing, she said, working through her 4th protein bar. This is science. Also, you're literally growing a person. People need calories. People who are pregnant for months, yes. Not people who are pregnant for. She consulted her biomonitor. Approximately 4 days, and already showing metabolic changes that should take weeks. Ryan pulled up comparative gestation data. Human pregnancies took 9 months. Zephyran pregnancies, when properly prepared through the harmony, took 14 months. What if the Wanderer protocols accelerate the process? If your ancestors needed to reproduce quickly in hostile environments? Then I'm going to be very pregnant very soon. That does appear to be the trajectory, yes. Zephira stared at her reflection in the lab's polished surfaces. Her uniform was already fitting differently, her body adapting with disturbing efficiency to its new purpose. I don't know if I'm ready for this. I don't think anyone's ever ready for biologically impossible hybrid offspring. That's not comforting. Again, honesty over comfort. Ryan saved another data file to his compilation. But for what it's worth, I'm not going anywhere. We're in this together. You barely know me. I know you're brave enough to scout alone in danger space. I know you're handling an impossible situation with more grace than I would. And I know that whatever this is, he gestured at the data displays. It's not something either of us planned, but it's real, and it matters. Zephira's ears tilted forward, which he'd learned meant she was listening carefully. The fleet will be here soon. Days at most. What do? We finished documenting everything. Then we transmitted everywhere. Fleet Command, human scientific institutions, independent councils. We make this public before anyone can make it disappear. That's your plan? Create a political incident. I prefer to think of it as aggressive transparency. Ryan pulled up communications protocols. If this child exists, if it's viable, it proves our species are more compatible than either civilization wants to admit. That's not just science, that's the future. Or it's a scandal that ruins both our careers and gets this pregnancy terminated as a biological hazard. You really are bad at optimism. And you're dangerously good at it. But Zephira was smiling slightly, her skin patterns brightening. Fine. We document everything. We go public. And when both our peoples are screaming for our heads, at least we'll have data. That's the spirit. The storm lifted on the 5th day like a curtain being drawn back from a stage, revealing the mess it had made of Kepler 442b's ionosphere. Ryan's communications array came back online with a cascade of alerts that made his display look like a small fireworks show. They're looking for you, he said unnecessarily, watching the fleet's search patterns paint themselves across orbital tracking. Zephira stood at the window, one hand resting on the slight curve of her abdomen that was becoming increasingly difficult to ignore. Of course they are. I'm 3 days overdue for check-in, and there's wreckage of my scout ship scattered across your crystal forest. Our crystal forest. I've decided to share custody after you crashed into it. She turned, one ear tilted in amusement. Generous of you. The fleet's transmissions were growing more insistent. Ryan could see the search grid tightening, sensor sweeps getting closer to his habitat's location. They had maybe 6 hours before someone arrived to retrieve their missing scout and discovered significantly more than they bargained for. Ready to become the most controversial people in 2 civilizations? Ryan asked, his finger hovering over the transmission cue he'd spent 2 days preparing. Not remotely. Send it anyway. He initiated the upload. There compiled research, medical scans, genetic analyses, hormone tracking, theoretical frameworks, and one very carefully worded introduction explaining that they were about to prove 60 years of xenobiology wrong, began broadcasting on multiple channels: human scientific networks, Zephira medical databases, independent research councils, even a few civilian news feeds that Ryan had reluctantly included at the last moment. No going back now, Zephira said quietly. There's been no going back since you woke up pregnant. This is just the part where we control the narrative. The responses started coming in within minutes. Ryan's academic credentials got him instant attention from human xenobiological institutes, while Zephira's fleet identification codes ensured their data went straight to Zephira Medical Command. The civilian news networks were slower, but more enthusiastic, and Ryan watched with mounting horror as headlines began populating across human space. Impossible miracle on Kepler 442b. He read aloud. Human and alien conceived child despite biological incompatibility. Oh, this one's good. Scout's honor. Zephyrin pregnancy breaks scientific consensus. I hate everything about this, Zephira said, but she was reading over his shoulder. The Zephyrin feeds are less creative. Contamination event requires investigation. Unauthorized reproduction under review. They're not even acknowledging it might be natural. Give them time. The data's solid. The data is terrifying. There's a difference. Ryan's personal communications began flooding with messages. Colleagues expressing shock, mentors demanding explanations, and one particularly memorable transmission from his dissertation advisor that was mostly creative profanity. But mixed in were genuine scientific inquiries, requests for follow-up data, and 3 separate grant offers to continue the research. Someone wants to fund us, Ryan said, slightly dazed. Multiple someones. Someone else wants to prosecute me for biological contamination. Zephira was reading Zephira military communications with increasing alarm, and my captain is using words that my translator is refusing to render into standard. Probably for the best. The fleet's response came through on official channels within the hour. Captain Varys' transmission was cold enough to freeze hydrogen, demanding Zephira's immediate extraction for medical quarantine and genetic decontamination protocols. The word contamination appeared 17 times in a 3-minute message. Decontamination, Zephira repeated softly. They want to terminate it. Ryan felt something protective and fierce rise in his chest. They'll have to go through both our governments first, and about 40 scientific institutions that are now watching this very closely. You made me famous. I made us both famous. Misery loves company. A new transmission arrived, this one from the Colonial Administration's Xenobiological Ethics Committee. Ryan opened it expecting censure and found instead a carefully worded statement acknowledging the situation's unprecedented nature and requesting Zephira's consent for ongoing monitoring and study. They're asking permission, Zephira said, surprised. Not demanding. Humans are weirdly big on consent. It's one of our better qualities. More messages flooded in. A Zephyrin medical researcher requesting tissue samples. A human geneticist offering sanctuary at a neutral research station. Several news outlets wanting interviews. One marriage proposal that Ryan deleted before Zephira could see it. This is out of control, Zephira said, but there was something in her voice that wasn't quite fear anymore. This is exactly as controlled as we can make it. Ryan pulled up the fleet's approach vectors. Your people will be here in 3 hours. We need to decide what you want to do. What I want is irrelevant. The fleet will extract me regardless of my preferences. Will they? You're not military. You're a civilian scout under contract, and you're currently the subject of active scientific inquiry by multiple institutions across human and neutral space. Ryan was thinking fast, pulling up legal codes and treaty provisions. If you request asylum for medical observation, they'll consider it an act of hostility. Or they'll consider it a scientist making an informed decision about her own body and the unprecedented biological event happening inside it. Zephira's biomonitor chimed softly. She glanced at the readings, and her skin patterns shifted to something Ryan had learned meant anxiety. Cellular division is accelerating. Whatever timeline we thought we had, it's faster. How much faster? Weeks instead of months. Maybe less. She looked at him, those large luminous eyes reflecting the lab's lights. I'm scared, Ryan. That's the most rational thing either of us has felt since this started. He moved closer, carefully not touching but present. But you're not alone in this. Whatever you decide, wherever you go, I'm with you. You're risking your career for someone you met 5 days ago. I'm risking my career for groundbreaking xenobiological research. That you happen to be carrying it is just a bonus. She laughed, that wind chime sound. Your humor is terrible. It's a defense mechanism. I'm terrified too. Another transmission arrived, this one from a neutral research station called Haven's Gate. The director, a human woman named Dr. Sarah Chun, no relation, sadly, offered immediate sanctuary, full medical facilities, and protection under neutral scientific treaty provisions. She's offering you a choice, Ryan said, forwarding the message to Zephira. She's offering us a choice, Zephira corrected. Your name is on this mess too. True. So what do you want to do? Zephira was quiet for a long moment, her hand resting on her abdomen, where their impossible child was growing at an alarming rate. When she spoke, her voice was steady. I want to understand what's happening to me. I want to know if this child is viable, if it's healthy, if it's really possible. I want answers before anyone, fleet or otherwise, makes decisions for me. Then we accept the sanctuary offer. My people will be furious. My people will be fascinated. It balances out. Ryan began composing their response. For what it's worth, I think you're making the right choice. I'm making the only choice that doesn't involve immediate medical intervention I'm not ready for. Also valid. The fleet's approach was now visible on orbital tracking. 3 ships in tight formation. They had maybe 2 hours before extraction teams arrived. Ryan sent their acceptance to Haven's Gate and received immediate confirmation. A transport ship would reach them within the hour. Cutting it close, Zephira observed. Story of my life lately. They spent the remaining time packing essentials and transmitting final data updates. Ryan included his complete moss sample archive because he was still technically a xenobotanist, even if he'd accidentally stumbled into reproductive biology. Zephira transmitted a formal notice to the fleet explaining her decision in language so carefully neutral it had probably been written by lawyers. The Haven's Gate transport arrived with 30 minutes to spare, a sleek civilian vessel broadcasting neutral scientific credentials. Its captain was cheerfully unconcerned about the diplomatic incident he was probably causing. Dr. Chun and guest, he confirmed. Welcome aboard. The fleet's hailing us, but we're under treaty protection, so they can complain loudly but legally. This is your plan? Zephira asked as they boarded. Hide behind scientific treaties? I prefer to think of it as strategic positioning. Also, yes, absolutely, that's exactly the plan. Haven's Gate turned out to be a converted asteroid station orbiting a dead moon, which Ryan felt was appropriately dramatic for their situation. The facility was gleaming and modern inside, all curved corridors and observation windows showing the black between stars. Dr. Sarah Chin met them at the docking bay, a woman in her 60s with sharp eyes and a sharper smile. Welcome to the eye of the political hurricane. How are you both holding up? Pregnant and infamous, Zephira said. So adequately. Good answer. Sarah gestured them toward the medical wing. We've prepared a full xenobiological suite. State-of-the-art equipment, neutral scientific oversight, and absolutely no one who can legally compel you to do anything you don't consent to. How long can we stay here? Ryan asked. As long as the research warrants. Or until someone declares war over you, whichever comes first. Comforting, Zephira muttered. The next 3 days were a blur of scans, samples, and increasingly frantic diplomatic communications that Sarah cheerfully intercepted before they could reach Zephira. The fleet had settled into orbit at a legally mandated distance, broadcasting formal protests and demands. Human colonial administration was being diplomatically vague, which apparently meant they were buying time while their xenobiology teams analyzed the data Ryan had sent. Your pregnancy is trending across 17 human worlds, Sarah reported during one medical check. Also 4 Zephyran colonies, though their media is being more circumspect about it. Circumspect meaning what? Zephira asked from the examination platform. Lots of words like alleged and unconfirmed and under investigation. But they're talking about it. Sarah studied the latest scan results. Your cellular division rate is still accelerating. At this pace, you're looking at maybe 4 weeks until term. 4 weeks, Zephira repeated. Zephyran pregnancies take 14 months. Zephyran pregnancies prepared through the Harmony take 14 months, Ryan corrected. This isn't that. This isn't anything anyone's ever seen before. Sarah highlighted several data points. Your body is adapting in real time. Watch this. These are your hormone levels from yesterday versus today. They're optimizing for rapid gestation while maintaining developmental stability. It's remarkable. Everyone keeps using that word, Zephira said dryly. Because it fits. You're rewriting xenobiological assumptions with every scan. Sarah pulled up a holographic model of the developing fetus. And look at this. The child's genetic structure is stable, true hybrid, not mosaic. Equal contribution from both parents, perfectly integrated. Ryan stared at the slowly rotating model. That shouldn't be possible without artificial genomic bridging. Yet here we are, watching it happen naturally, which suggests your peoples are more compatible than anyone realized. Sarah glanced between them. The question is why. This level of compatibility doesn't happen by accident. Ancient evolutionary programming, Ryan said. Zephira's people had dormant protocols for rapid reproduction with compatible species. Or, Sarah said carefully, both your peoples had protocols. Humans have plenty of dormant genetic sequences we don't fully understand. What if compatibility was built into both species? Zephira's ears tilted forward. You're suggesting our peoples were designed to be compatible. I'm suggesting it's a possibility worth investigating. But that's research for later. Right now, we focus on keeping you and the child healthy. The political situation continued to escalate in that peculiar way where everyone was shouting, but no one was actually doing anything. The Zephyran fleet maintained their orbit and their protests. Human colonial administration sent increasingly elaborate diplomatic inquiries. And Haven's Gate remained serenely neutral, protected by scientific treaties that no one wanted to be the first to violate. Ryan spent his days helping with medical monitoring and his nights reviewing genetic data. Zephira spent her time eating enormous meals, arguing with fleet communications she wasn't supposed to be seeing, and occasionally looking terrified when she thought no one was watching. You don't have to be brave all the time, Ryan told her one night in the observation lounge. I'm a scout. Being brave is literally in the job description. Being scared doesn't mean you're not brave. It means you're honest. Zephira was quiet, watching stars wool past the window. Her hand rested on her abdomen, which was now obviously rounded, impossible to hide. I keep thinking about what happens after. When the child is born, both our peoples will want to study it, claim it, decide what it means. Both our peoples can make requests, which we'll consider on their merits, Ryan said firmly. But this child is yours, ours, not a political symbol or a scientific specimen. It's going to be both whether we want it or not. Probably, but it gets to be a person first. Week 3 arrived with a cascade of developments. The pregnancy was progressing faster than even Sarah's optimistic projections. Zephira's body was adapting remarkably, but the rapid pace was taking its toll. She was exhausted, her metabolism burning through calories, her biomonitor constantly adjusting to new parameters. And then the Zephyran transmission came through on official channels, marked urgent and addressed specifically to Zephira. Sarah brought it to her personally. It's from someone called Elder Mareth. The message says she's your grandmother. Zephira went very still. My grandmother is a council elder. We haven't spoken in years. She's requesting a private communication. I can arrange it if you want. The conversation happened in a shielded communications room. Ryan waited outside, trying not to pace, until Zephira emerged an hour later with her skin patterns cycling through colors he hadn't seen before. She believes me, Zephira said quietly, about the Wanderer protocols. She said there are old records, sealed archives about the colony era, genetic capabilities that were deliberately suppressed when the harmony became central to our identity. Suppressed why? Because the harmony gave us control, structure, identity. But the old ways were messy, unpredictable, exactly what we see happening now. Zephira sat down heavily. She said the council is divided. Some want to maintain that this pregnancy is contamination. Others are starting to ask questions about what else we've forgotten about ourselves. That's progress. That's political chaos. But she offered something else. Zephira looked up at Ryan. Sanctuary, on a Zephyran colony world, under her protection. She said if I want to raise this child among my people, she'll make sure we're safe. Ryan felt something twist in his chest. That's good. That's what you wanted. She said we, Ryan. Both of us. You and me and the child. Zephira's ears were tilted forward, her expression uncertain. She wants to meet the human who helped me survive, who stood by me when this all fell apart. I'm not sure helped is the right word, considering I'm 50% responsible for the situation. Exactly 50%. I did the math. Despite everything, Ryan laughed. So what do you want to do? I don't know yet, but I have options now. That's more than I had a week ago. The birth happened on week 4, day 2, in Havens Gate's medical suite with Sarah and 2 xenobiological specialists monitoring everything. It was fast. Zephyran births were apparently efficient when not extended through the Harmony protocols, and Ryan spent most of it trying not to pass out, while Zephira demonstrated that scouts were indeed very brave, even when terrified. The child emerged crying, a sound that worked across species, and Sarah placed the baby in Zephira's arms with the kind of reverence usually reserved for miracles. Healthy, Sarah said, her voice thick. All readings normal. Slightly elevated temperature. Hybrid immune system, showing robust activity. She's perfect. Zephira whispered. Daughter. Congratulations. Ryan looked at the tiny being in Zephira's arms. Skin that shifted between tones. Human-proportioned face, with delicate pointed ears. A dusting of hair that might become darker. She was impossibly small and impossibly real, and he felt something fundamental shift in his understanding of what mattered. We made a person, he said stupidly. We made a bridge, Zephira corrected softly. Between worlds. Between peoples. The baby opened her eyes, large and luminous like her mother's, but with human depth, and stared at them with the profound seriousness of the newly born. Hello, Zephira said. I'm your mother. This is Ryan. He's your father, though neither of us planned this very well. We're doing our best, Ryan added, reaching out to touch one tiny hand. Miniature fingers wrapped around his, gripped surprisingly strong. Welcome to the complicated universe. The political fallout took months to settle, but eventually both governments reached an awkward accommodation. The child, named Lyra, after a constellation visible from both homeworlds, would be recognized by both species, raised with dual citizenship, and studied respectfully rather than invasively. Zephira accepted her grandmother's offer of sanctuary, but with modifications. They'd split time between Zephyran and human worlds, ensuring Lyra grew up understanding both her heritages. Ryan took a research position studying compatible xenobiology, because apparently accidentally discovering cross-species reproduction made him an expert. 6 months later, Ryan found Zephira in their shared quarters on the colony world threshold, watching Lyra sleep in her crib. The baby's skin patterns pulsed softly with dreams, and her tiny ears twitched at sounds only she could hear. She grabbed my ear today, Zephira said. I think she finds them amusing. Everything's amusing at 6 months. Ryan joined her at the crib. I got another message from the colonial administration. 3 more cases of human Zephyrin conception reported, all after proximity during environmental stress. So we weren't a fluke. We were the first documented case. The others are citing our research, using our protocols. He smiled. We accidentally started a trend of people from different species producing impossible children together. That's going to complicate things. Things were already complicated. This is just more interesting complication. Lyra stirred, making a small sound that was half human baby and half something musical that had to be Zephyrin. Zephira reached in, lifting her daughter with practiced ease. Do you ever regret it? She asked quietly. Any of it? Ryan thought about the crashed ship, the storm, the moment of waking up to impossible consequences. He thought about political firestorms and death threats and grant offers. He thought about watching Lyra discover her hands for the first time, the way she smiled at both her parents with equal joy. Not even a little, he said honestly. Good. Zephira shifted Lyra to Ryan's arms. Because your daughter needs changing, and it's definitely your turn. Is it though? I'm pretty sure. Your turn. Ryan took Lyra to the changing station, making faces that earned him a delighted gurgle. Behind him, Zephira was already pulling up research data, because she discovered she actually enjoyed xenobiology when it wasn't happening to her body without permission. Outside their window, 2 suns set over an alien horizon, painting the sky in colors neither Earth nor the Zephyrin homeworld had ever produced. Inside, an impossible family continued the complicated work of building something new from pieces that weren't supposed to fit. And in her father's arms, Lyra yawned widely, showing off toothless gums, and settled into sleep with the absolute confidence of children who don't yet know they're supposed to be impossible. The universe, Ryan reflected, had a sense of humor after all.